we wash it, and then the next 6 months we wear it again. Ice cream day. Very intelligent.
How are you? I'm well.
Likewise.
Yes. Well, no, I like Marvin Hagler.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Yes, sir. Marvin Hagler.
Marvin Hagler was something different.
You're not gonna believe who my favorite heavyweight champion of the world was. Riddick, Big Daddy Bo.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Paterson.
Good afternoon.
Well, on this beautiful June 19th, as we celebrate Juneteenth, we are here to commemorate our ancestors and those that have come before us. As we speak, I see our council members coming forward, Councilman Bill McCoy, Councilwoman Lalisa Mims.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm encouraged to see that the world is starting to recognize that Black Lives Matter. And in addition, the world has to recognize that Black history matters as well. And that's why we are here today. And that's why I issued an executive order declaring today, Juneteenth, a holiday in the city of Paterson. And Congressman Pascrell, thanks for joining us. I will tell you why Black Lives Matter. Because when I was in school, Akbar, we learned about the Greeks and the Romans, and we should. But Africa had outstanding civilizations as well. Abdul, if you look at Mali, with Mansa Musa, an African ruler who is considered to be the richest man who ever lived, hailed from Africa and a great civilization of Mali. No disrespect to Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, but it was a man in Africa who was considered to be the richest man who ever lived. And let's think about Songhai, another great civilization in Africa, with Askia Muhammad. He was a ruler as well, but that part of history is not being taught. And if there's one takeaway we can get from now, is to infuse our textbooks, American history textbooks, with the history of Africa and where it all started. That is world history, but it's American history too. Because the story of African Americans started in Africa. That is correct. Black history is world history. And we could also learn lessons from one of my favorite leaders in history, Marcus Garvey. We could all use some more Marcus Garvey. Why? Because at a time when people were being told that black skin was a mistake, he was saying, it's not a mistake. God doesn't make mistakes. Black is beautiful. And today we stand together to reflect, to rejoice, and to unite under the banner that black is beautiful, that black lives do matter, and black history matters too. And so July 4th did not mean independence for everyone, but Juneteenth means freedom. And today we celebrate freedom and let freedom ring. Thank you very much.
All right. I want to thank the mayor, who is a great historian. And the facts are that we as black folks here in America since 1619 have not been free, totally free. The argument that we're having right now, that Black Lives Matter, has to be the most ridiculous thing ever. Yes. This country was built on the back of black people. Yes. So don't forget that. And realize slavery is not part of African American history. Yes. No other people have been captured and brought to a country and disrespected like African American people, meaning black people. Yes. So make that perfectly clear. There are two different levels of it. Two different levels. We're talking about civil rights and moving on. So make it perfectly clear. Next we have the person who's down in Washington, D.C., who is fighting number 45. According to number 45, he made Juneteenth famous. I don't know what country or what rock he's been under, but it makes no sense that he even come to that. 401 years, and he's talking about he made us famous. If that does not motivate you to get out and vote in November, I don't know what will. And I know the person that supports us and who's been endorsed by the Congressional Black Caucus is our Congressman, Bill Pascrell.
Yes, yes. Go get him.
Yes.
Thank you, Benjie. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, Martin Luther King said. It bends towards justice. So we are not afraid, are we? Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll bear with me, my brothers and sisters, we lived together all my life in Paterson. And this is the speech I presented on the floor of the House exactly 20 years ago today. Juneteenth. In fact, most of the people, Congress people, did not know what I was talking about when I said Juneteenth. Different story today. Juneteenth is also the name of a great book written by whom I consider one of the great writers of the 20th century. That is Ralph Ellison. He wrote The Invisible Man. It's often been misunderstood, yes? The Supreme Court made a decision in Dred Scott, but that decision was overturned in 1862. 3 years before, exactly to the day of Juneteenth. Sometimes the Supreme Court needs to be corrected by the Congress of the United States. The Emancipation Proclamation receives its national appreciation, its rightful appreciation, as the gateway to freedom for African Americans. But it took a civil war, it took the 13th Amendment to the United States to formally outlaw slavery. That Emancipation Proclamation resulted in millions of slaves throughout this country who were unaffected by the provisions of the proclamation. And as you have already heard, word traveled very slowly, did not get to Galveston, Texas till 2 years later. So this is indeed a celebration today. Time for us to reflect on what this meant. Juneteenth serves as an historical milestone. People of the triumph of the human spirit over the cruelty of slavery. I think we should all take a moment not only to recognize the moral bankruptcy of slavery, but also to celebrate the achievements of those living in such inhumane conditions. Despite the rigors of slavery, African Americans contribute everything from agricultural inventions and medical breakthroughs to music. They contributed a legacy of culture, of language, religion, a lesson of survival. Ralph Ellison, who I believe is one of the great writers of the 20th century, he was an African American and was frequently misunderstood. The genius of blacks, the black culture, was not in race, he wrote, but in human beings who bore the race. Blood and skin do not think. There were brutal, there were dehumanizing acts against blacks, no question about it. But the progress and the opportunity for blacks in America cannot depend on white oppressors changing their behavior, changing their work, changing their mind, as much as it would depend on individuals understanding and believing in their own God-given resources, their own skills, your own talents, your own creativity, your own persistence, who you are. This profiling a whole group of people is not acceptable. And it is an attempt to rob one of his individuality, of each personality, and of each uniqueness. And I say that when I drive through Paterson, when I come back from D.C., and I see some people, all colors, who've given up, throw in the sponge and say, what the hell? Ellison believed that to believe solely in the idea that white oppression determined the freedom of blacks was to minimize the power of each black person, and it would make redemption depend upon how it was treated. We don't accept that. Lincoln did not free the slaves freed themselves. This is a perspective. The outskirts of society allowed him to run point on its greatest ideals while grieving over its greatest failures. He argued against the idea that there existed a required mode of racial anger. You're supposed to be angry this way. There were, he contended, many possible responses to injustice. He wrote, there was even an American Negro tradition which abhors as obscene any trading in one's own anguish for gain or sympathy. Those are powerful words, my friend. Powerful words, particularly in our society today. So we have decided, for the most part, that each black person in our society is an incarnation. Someone wrote that, of his race. As Edward Rothstein wrote, being battered about by both blacks and whites who imposed the revisions of racial identity, Lincoln freed the slaves. Ellison would say only slaves could free the slaves. My friends, I won't read you the rest, but I want you to know that that speech given 20 years ago, which I wrote, is my testimony today to all of us in Paterson. We have responsibility to our brothers and sisters. And as Martin Luther King said, that rod bends towards justice. Be hopeful. Be celebrating. Be connected to your neighbor. You cannot talk about us unless you live with us. I'm tired of people living in enclaves telling us how to live in the city of Paterson. Tired of it. And you have to stand up and speak and be heard. God bless the mayor, the council, and God bless all of you for being here this morning on a heck of a hot day.
At this time now, between Andre and the Congressman, you guys have yielded your time for the rest of the program, but we appreciate you. But we would like to acknowledge the Deputy Mayor of Hackensack, Dave Sims, is with us here today. Thank you, Dave, for coming out. We also have some people who are historians within themselves here in the city of Paterson for various reasons. We have Dr. Joseph Fulmore here with us today, former superintendent. Skip Van Rensselaer, whose family is part of the history of Paterson, here with us today. We have Shelton Prescott. Where's Shelton at? I know I saw him here. Where's Shelton back here? Syracuse. Dalton Price. Yes. Reverend Clayton, you can work your way up here because I'm going to need you for 2 seconds. 2 seconds, but you are part of our history, so don't go anywhere. Get up here. Thank you. But at this time, the mayor alluded to it before, and the councilman talked about it, the whole diaspora of what America's all about. So people need to understand through the slave trade that our brothers and sisters in South America, the Caribbean, you look through there, Africa is Africans. So you have African blood in you. There is no pure blood if it didn't come from the motherland, from the true land. So my Dominican brothers and sisters, my Puerto Ricans, you are part of this issue. George Floyd in the 8 minutes and 46 seconds should be a concern to you. Think about it. There are many of you who are from the southern part of the Caribbean who are darker than me, and when you get pulled over, you're going to get the same treatment as me. So you should be concerned. Right. At this time, we'd like to thank everybody who came out. I see the fire chief, the police chief is here, Director Speziel, another legend in the city of Paris, Miss Bradley. Where's Miss Bradley? I saw Miss Bradley here. So many people here. We also like to acknowledge the First Lady of Paterson for Hunter. Say, I appreciate it. She needs a raise, because if she could put up with this guy, she should be getting paid a lot of money. But at this time, we're going to thank everybody. Tony Perez, where's Tony at? Tony. Always a friend, yes. And at this time, the mayor will lead the leaf in with the city council. And we want to remind everybody once again, tomorrow 9 a.m., tomorrow 9 a.m. And I see the Arabic American Association is here supporting us, and we'll see you tomorrow morning. We appreciate you, and we appreciate everybody who's out here today. Today at City Hall, 5 p.m., the pastors will be praying, and that's 155 Market Street. You haven't moved, right? 155 Market Street at 5 p.m. The pastors will be praying for Juneteenth, so please make sure you come out. This is not going to be a fire sale, a one-time thing. George Floyd's life has to matter. It has to be matter. This cannot be something that we get hot for a minute and then we stop. We really need to pick up the pace. And when you see these young folks rioting in the streets, the riot is the voice of the unheard. That's the problem. Nobody's listening to them. We have to remember 25 years ago, some of these faces were here when Lawrence Myers was shot and killed in the city of Paterson. And that officer was not, he was let go and whatever you want to call it, and it was done. But there were so many promises during that time to our young black folks. Many of those people who are now, 35, 40 years ago, going through here, we never lived up to that promise. But when those young people during the Lawrence Myers riot start breaking windows and burning stuff in Paterson, we made a lot of promises to them. And part of it was education, recreation, healthcare. And 25 years later, we haven't lived up to it. We haven't lived up to it. 30 years ago, Philip Pinnell was killed in Teaneck. So let's not forget, this is not a new situation. This is a 401-year situation. So make that perfectly clear. So at this time, as the dean, we want to leave the wreath ceremony with the mayor. And thank you, everybody else. Thank you. Tomorrow we will call out names. If you have names, you can be acknowledged tomorrow. We will call out names, all of our brothers and sisters who were lost. And not just our brothers and sisters, those who were killed in senseless violence, we will acknowledge them also tomorrow.